Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to review the DIVEVOLK 4 SeaTouch MAX Creator Kit. That's a big long-winded name, but something I was super excited to give a try, and I took this thing on over 40 dives now and have some pretty incredible stories to share throughout this video. And I know you're thinking it's probably pretty dangerous putting your phone into this dive case, right? Well, the results might surprise you. All right, let's dive on in. So first of all, in full transparency, DIVEVOLK worked with me and sent me this whole kit for free for review for my channel. But with that stipulation, there's no requirements I say anything good about it, and this is not a sponsored video. I'm not being paid for a review. So everything here is my true honest thoughts about the DIVEVOLK 4 case. And I'm gonna try and show a lot of my unboxing here because I also want you just to get a clear and transparent view of everything that was sent, because I think there were some additional pieces that were sent outside of the kit, and I just want full transparency on what I received and also what I reviewed for this video. DIVEVOLK has a whole bunch of gear, and I was excited to give it a try. One such piece that came a little bit after I started reviewing and I didn't get in my unboxing is this piece, which is a macro lens, and I'll show you how that works in a short while. Okay, let's kick things off with a product overview. So essentially, what a DIVEVOLK housing is basically a housing for your phone, so you can take it diving. You might be asking, why would you want to do that? But let's face it, your phone does a lot of stuff and it has really good camera built in for photos and video and a bunch of digital processing to boot. Not to mention, at the safety stops, you can listen to some music. That's pretty cool. You can use virtually any app on your phone as long as it supports offline. You're not going to get any internet while you're diving, so you have to have some thought in mind of making sure everything's working offline. But basically, the cool thing here is this is a touch screen, and so you can operate your phone almost as normal. And so this works very well at pressure and depth. I tried it all the way down to 120 feet and no problem. It does quite a good job. So you might be asking, how trustworthy is this thing for your phone? And so opening it up, we can see that there's just two bolts here at the top. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, that's it. And that's exactly what I was thinking to myself. Like, there's this soft pressure membrane that's going to basically be held down with these screws as you screw it in. And so again, I took this thing on 40 dives, not a single leak once. I will say that I did have some fogging issues at some points on my dive. And that is primarily on me because I got a little bit of moisture in, because I would want to charge my phone in between dives or use my phone. And so I was always opening this thing, maybe reaching in with slightly damp hands and getting some moisture inside. And so a quick fix was me putting in these two little moisture absorbers, and that solved most of the problem. But I would just make sure that you put it around the lens area. That's where your lens of the camera is going to be. And so that's where you're probably going to want most moisture removed. So just put it around the area and you should be all set to go. So anyways, the main thing is when you are closing this thing, you're going to screw these in as so. And when you have it fully pressurized, you should be able to see it fully closed. See, right now, I'm not sure if you can see it, it's not fully closed. So you have to do your due diligence here and try to close it all the way. In fact, when you're under some pressure and depth, you will find it's a little bit loose still. So maybe on your dive, you'll find it a little bit loose and you can tighten it a little bit more. But basically, once it's sealed, it's gonna have enough pressure on that little membrane to keep your phone safe. So across all my dives, no problem. And I've actually met several people now that swear by these things and have gone thousands of dives with them. One had told me that only one time it leaked on them, and they do say it's their fault because they didn't double check that it was fully sealed and they made that mistake and flooded their phone, unfortunately. So it can happen, and it does happen, but as long as you make sure it's sealed, no problem. And basically, opening it is just the reverse. You can just unscrew them all the way out and flip it open as so. And you'll see inside is, oops, I just lost my moisture dampeners, is just basically a mold for your phone. And so what's really cool about this is, as long as you have a generic phone shape, doesn't matter what kind of phone you have, iPhone, Android, small Android, doesn't matter. As long as it can fit into this thing will support it via a 3D printed mold. And so these are provided by DIVEVOLK, and you can just print one that fits your phone, put your phone in here, and the touchscreen will be fully accessible. So it's important that you do have to have the mold. You have to 3D print one for your phone because it's going to keep your phone from wiggling around, and it's going to put the right amount of pressure against a soft tissue membrane for the pressure point, so you can use the touchscreen. So if we look in here, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing really in there. There's a warning, so if you don't have your actual phone in there, that you shouldn't go diving with it on empty housing. That's a fair ask, but that's about all that's interesting that's inside there. Beyond that, we can look at what's external. So here you'll see some bracketing for some screws. One of these is to basically put a lens in this area so that you can put different lenses on them, M86 lenses. And so those pieces look like this. You can put them on or take them off as you please. And so the nice part is you just loosen it and you can fit it to wherever your lenses are on your phone. So when you're using your camera, you're basically not going to get any of the sidewall of the lens or anything in front of it. And so again, this is an M86 screw that supports any M86 lens, but in particular, I was using the DIVEVOK lenses. So let's talk about those. So one thing to note, that I tried out the 0.6x wide lens for the DIVEVOK, and I found because my phone already supports 0.6x wide lens as a physical lens, that didn't provide too much value to me on the phone, because when I did you think that if you did the 0.6 lens on my phone plus the 0.6 wide lens that they stack, but that wasn't the case. Basically, I couldn't get it in a way where I wasn't seeing the sidewall of the lens. And so I can only use the wide lens when I was using the regular lens of my phone. So the unfortunate thing is that was a little bit less wide lens than the one that's built into my phone. It looked a little janky. So the wide lens, at least the 0.6 wide lens, may not be for everyone. If your phone supports a 0.6 or even 0.5 wide lens already natively with that extra additional lens, you can look at the back of your phone. They have usually like 3 to 5 lenses nowadays on the newer phones. You can kind of get an idea of, if your phone actually needs it. But some older phones will definitely leverage that wide lens, and it could give you better shots. And so the beauty of a wide lens is that you can be closer to your subject and get less like debris, backscatter, and even discoloration in between you and the object. So it looks a lot more crisp. So you want to be close as possible to get rid of all those things in between you and the subject. And so that wide lens gives you that capability. But again, my phone had it built in, so it wasn't really needed. So that wide lens didn't provide a lot of value for me. But what's really cool was the macro lens. And so the macro lens in all M67 lenses just basically go right onto the attachment point and screw in. So it takes just a few moments to take it on and off. The hard part is figuring out where you're gonna store your lenses on your person without scratching them. But this one does have a nice cover built in that I just took off, but you just put it on and take it off before and after you're done using it. But you can see that it fits right on there in front of your lenses. And so this is gonna give you a much sharper and detailed view of small things. So it's basically kind of like a magnifying glass for your phone to get those sharper images of small stuff. And that's pretty cool. So while I'm talking here, I'll be showing some of the footage I got with this macro lens. And just to show, this is what it looks like with the covers on. Another thing that you can also utilize is a physical red filter. Now, I'm not a big fan of physical red filters. I am a fan of using software filters to add red in. And a lot of our cameras today do kind of try to do that. And there's also third-party apps on top of it that try to improve that image. So it's worth noting that this can be nice, especially for older phones, but it's not always needed for the newer phones. Next, let's go ahead and talk about how you can secure it to your person. So there's this nice bungee that will basically, it works really well. So when you're starting your dive, you can clip this on to a D-ring, and it's not really meant to be removed or put on during a dive. So you just kind of put it onto a D-ring somewhere and kind of forget about it. When you start your dive, you kind of just tuck it into your pocket, put your elbow over it. You want to protect the membrane, the lens, and anything from being scratched. And so once you start your dive, all you have to do is unclip it, and now it's going to be hanging. I will say that this thing is quite negatively buoyant in the water, so it will just hang if you have no floats on it, which I'll show you my float setup in a little bit. But when you're ending your dive or just want to secure it, you can just come in and attach it like that. And that works really beautifully. It works really nice. I can't say I had any issues with this. And I do want to talk about this thing here, which is the underwater external shutter. And so this thing is really cool because it actually works with your Bluetooth on your phone inside the case, and it communicates via Bluetooth to your phone inside the case. There's no direct connection. In fact, you just install this right on top of the external housing. So it doesn't like go through. It is just externally attached and wirelessly communicating to your phone because it's so close. And that's really cool. And so to activate, all you have to do is push and hold the trigger mechanism. If you hold it long enough, it will kind of just activate. And then you can basically start recording, stop recording, or take a photo with this one button. It's basically just a shutter button. And it's just in such a good position for a trigger. I really liked it. But it isn't without some issues, some nuances. It's not perfect, which I did find that I think because they're trying to save battery, it does tend to time out and turn off. So you'll have to push and hold it for a substantial amount of time to turn it back on, which I, in particular, found a little bit annoying. Sometimes I'd be trying to take a photo, bam, bam, nothing. So you have to reactivate it. And there's no like notification, oh, your external trigger has turned on or it's turned off. At least not on my Android phone. Maybe on other phones that might be the case. But for me, it didn't tell me. And so I was never notified. So sometimes when I want to take a photo, bam, bam, nothing. I lose the opportunity to take my photo or my video. So after some time, I stopped trusting it as I noticed the more I dived, and I would basically use the thumb to hit the shutter button on my phone, and that kind of worked most of the time. At least I know I was guaranteed it would work. So it's unfortunate. I do really like this position and the way it works, but again, the fact that it times out so seemingly quickly, at least it's not lasting a whole dive, seems that it's kind of a miss. So maybe with some updates to this thing, it definitely can be improved. But beyond just a timeout issue, it works really well, surprisingly well. And then let's talk about this single arm setup. They have different kind of trays, and this is the single arm tray. So basically is going to attach to the phone as so. Okay, so here we are. We have everything assembled. And so I want to point out that this thing is decently negative in the water, especially with this handle. So I went ahead and put 4 small compact floats on there. And this basically makes it near neutral, maybe slightly positive in the water, and it just makes it so much easier to handle. So, you know, these floats are mine. I put them on there, but just 4 floats is enough to basically neutral this thing out, and it makes it so much easier to manipulate in the water. Of course, it's not dragging anywhere. It makes it a lot easier. And so you can kind of see that this is kind of the design. You hold it with this arm. You can have your hand here with the trigger. So one small gripe I have with this thing is the way you get your phone out. You kind of move it forward like that. You unscrew, you move your phone out, and then put it back in the same way. And then move it back, you secure it. And so the one issue I have with this design as it is during the dives, I kept kind of moving forward, especially when it compresses in water. You have to like screw it in. And so I just found that a little bit annoying, and so I just wanted to mention it. And there's definitely an opportunity for an improvement with the design, because I was thinking to myself, with some small grooves along the edge here, when you tighten it, if there was some small grooves in there, that as long as it's decently tight, it doesn't even have to be all the way tight, just tight enough that those grooves are jutting over the edge here, then while I'm diving, I don't have to worry about jutting forward, because it just happened enough that it annoyed me. So I just wanted to mention it. Maybe it'll annoy you too. And one nice thing about the handle, and it's going to award you, is the ability to use a light. And so obviously you would always want to have your light, and once you're on the dive, you'd want it kind of pointing at an angle, and so that it's not directly in the way that the camera's facing, but pointing at an angle and trying to angle the light source away from where the camera is, so the backscatter is bouncing that way and not towards the camera. And so a nice long arm like this is quite nice, and you can have your dive light, your video light, on the ball joint here. And so during this review, I had a 2000 lumen DIVEVOLK light. And I will say that it's quite nice. It does have a nice distributed light cast, and so it did illuminate quite well, and it worked very predictably. It has very simple controls, and it was perfect for my use cases. And while I'm speaking, I'll be showing videos of me using it, and you can kind of get a good idea of how much light is being output from it. But I would say, for me personally, 2000 lumens is definitely on the low end for a video light, especially in the murky waters of Seattle. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I took this rig to Mount Pello, which was really cool to try it out. And our visibility wasn't absolutely amazing in Mount Pello, but there were some days where it was a little bit better, so you can kind of see and tell from the footage yourself of how well it performed. But just from the controls, the simple to use battery with a nice USB on the top, it worked really wonderfully and had pretty good battery life. I think there was a number of days that I just charged it once overnight, and it lasted the entire day for my videoing needs. Lastly, there's this nice little cover that comes with it, and it works pretty well. Basically, the idea of this is not so much, maybe you could use it in between dives, but I generally would just use it for luggage and travel. And so you can kind of see here that it gets put right over the lens area, so I didn't have to take anything off. It works without me having to disassemble anything. And so it goes right here, and it covers the entire back area, so protecting the soft gel tissue. And it has these kind of 3 straps here that will kind of wrap around this area to help secure it around and make sure that doesn't slip off easily in your luggage and stuff, or backpack. And I was able to carry this both because it is kind of heavy. I carried it in my carry-on, and no scratches or anything. It protected it fairly well. So that performed wonderfully. So aside from that, let's just go ahead and talk about some important specs that you have as a diver have to just be aware of. And so one of them is that it only is good down to 60 meters or 200 feet. So for you technical divers hoping that you can be listening to audiobooks or some music on some really long decompression dives, just keep that in mind, that 200 feet or 60 meters is the maximum limit. So you're not gonna go too deep with it, but often 60 meters is plenty for most divers, especially for recreational. So that limit is sufficient for most of us. So on land with all the accessories, it runs about 375 grams or 13.2 ounces. And some additional specs is they say that this thing can be pressed about 100,000 times in its lifetime. So they're saying that the touchscreen has about 100,000 touches. And it's also worth noting too, I remember reading, and it's something I've also tried to avoid, is you want to avoid dragging and dropping from the edges. So there is a specific way you have to kind of set up your phone, because I do notice that while touches work really good, and also definitely like if you have like a thumb fingerprint screening or something, those aren't going to work through this screen. So it's just worth noting that your phone you kind of have to set it up in a specific way. And so one thing I also had to do with my phone is I didn't want the screen to time out and go through security, like, biometric or trying to read my face. None of that's going to work through the phone. So I had to change it to basically be able to, if my touch wasn't working, allow a bypass, like a code, so that I could unlock it underwater. And the screen should stay on for maximum time. So that I set that, I think, at 15 minutes. And I try to avoid doing stuff like from the very bottom. So like some phones depend on it more than others. My phone, fortunately, not so much, where you need to like click and drag. My wife's phone, which is a Pixel, I think the clicking and dragging from the bottom is a very normal thing, it seems. So it might vary from phone, but the advisory is try not to like push from the bottom up all the time. And so you might have to turn on some accessibility features. And out of the box, when I bought the case, they do have some instructions of how to set up different phones to try and make it easier to use. But it's worth noting that you might find you have to use your phone in a slightly different way. Over time, I didn't really mind. And in fact, it didn't matter to me. Some people might choose to just go buy a second phone that they can use exclusively with the case, especially if you're a little paranoid about potentially flooding and ruining your phone. Something to keep in mind. That way you can have it just set up for the case, and that's basically its entire purpose. But that's not me. I actually have been using my primary phone, and so far, so good. And on their website, they do say that the touch screen is limited down to 30 meters or 100 feet. Like I said, I did use it below that, fairly okay. So at some point, I'm sure if the touch screen will get less sensitive and it'll be harder to use a little bit below that. So I just wanted to point that out too. I didn't have too much experience with that recreationally diving, so it worked really well on all of my dives above 40 meters, 130 feet. And again, just to remind, that worked really well underwater, but you might want to consider getting floats, because this made my life a lot easier operating it. It just was so much easier. Beyond that, I just want to talk about some potential applications for this thing too, because I see a whole lot of potential. So aside from being potentially a really good camera housing, being your phone, you can play music, you can listen to an audiobook. It kind of might sound a little bit weird. Like, why would you want to go underwater for a limited amount of time on compressed gas and be spending that time listening to audio? But for tech divers who do decompression dives, you kind of just want to relax and chill during decompression. And so that's where this thing is really nice. You could basically download an offline Netflix or offline music or an offline audiobook and just sit there and chill. That's pretty cool. You can take notes on your dive. Let's say you wanted to work on your dive log. And even recreational divers, hey, you have to do a safety stop, which is about 3 minutes. What all did you see on your dive? You could wait till you get back to the boat or back to the shore, but then maybe you forget stuff and stuff happens. You're decompressing, you're relaxing for your safety stop. Might as well pull up a dive log and start entering it in now. That's pretty cool. Another nice use case is I can basically just open an email app or a to-do app and just make notes to myself or type a message and communicate with other people. For example, let's say Bob and Billy were running a little bit low on gas, so they communicated to me that they're gonna go up early. So I saw them, wave goodbye, and now they're gone. So it's just you and me now or something. Probably shorter message than that. But you get the point. You can actually communicate. You're not limited to hand signs and trying to figure out how to say that effectively, and understand my buddy understood that from my hand signs is a little bit of a challenge in and of itself, but it's really easy to communicate that when you have the full language in front of your fingertips. For, I imagine, dive masters and instructors, it can be super useful, or even dive guides, that super useful to communicate certain messages and even instruction or feedback on the fly as well. And imagine you're a dive guide, you're going down and wanting to share some history of a wreck. What are we seeing right now? Well, here's what it looked like 10 years ago, here's what it looks like now. You can kind of use the phone case to enhance the experience of your guests. And imagine an app where you're seeing some fish before your eyes, and the app could just identify on the fly what kind of fish it is. It really could help for fish identification. This is the kind of fish it could be. So the options are limitless, and you can imagine, I'm actually a software engineer by nature. I like to build stuff. And so I got the gears going that I could build something that can utilize this case quite a bit. So I'm building my own very DiveWise app for this ecosystem because I was just really excited for all the potential possibilities of how I could use my phone. And while I still do carry an action camera around for potentially as a backup camera, this is very niche for me, but my whole thing diving is trying to share it with you. So obviously the only way I can share it is if I can film it. So I do carry some backup cameras. It's that redundancy, right? Scuba divers always have redundancy, so I have redundant cameras. But that's a niche application, but you could very well just get by with this thing as your primary camera as well. And the nice thing is you already have a phone, and that probably has a good camera already. So if you just bought a housing for it, you could be saving money over a more expensive camera. And like I said earlier too, I met some very experienced divers who basically just do all their travel with this thing and have some really amazing stories and videos to share from it, just from the DIVEVOLK alone. And that's really cool. So overall, between the 40-ish dives I put on it, I didn't see any necessarily quality or maintenance issues. There's no O-rings to be changing too often. There's just this plastic flap that you will have to make sure stays in good condition, because that's what will put pressure on. And I don't see that being too hard. With the kit, you do get an extra one, so you could replace that. And I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to replace that myself, but it's still going strong, so I don't see any need to replace anytime soon. But like I said, you'll have an extra one. And overall, there's no rusting, just with some little bit of maintenance. It's been holding up quite well. In terms of comparison, I don't own too many dive housing for phones, so I can only speak to what others have told me, not from experience. So I just want to mention that some phones operate in the way where they basically, you'll pump the air out and it'll be vacuum sealed inside, which is just an extra measure of security for what's inside of it. So it is worth noting that there is no vacuum seal with this thing. It is what it is. It's just these two screws. And so that makes some people nervous. And I did meet two individuals who told me that they've lost phones from this thing. So it can happen, especially imagine if you're diving all the time with it. And it's just worth noting that there's no extra security blanket if this thing fails. So maybe that's a good reason to have an additional phone that you don't mind losing with this thing. But again, so far, I'm gonna knock on wood, I haven't lost my phone, and it is my main phone. And it's also what I'm developing my DiveWise app on as well. So who is this thing for? Honestly, as a tech diver, it excites me. I'm just so happy to have this thing, and it just gives me options for communication. It gives me options for building the app. I can build an ecosystem around it and listen to music. It's a pretty good camera built in just by using my phone. And another application that I'm also thinking about for my app is being able to map a dive site. So it's really cool that you'll have this thing with you. You can have depth charts in front of you, and you can work on mapping a dive site and sharing that with others. And that's so cool. So it just opens up a lot of options. It's a camera, it's a full phone, it's everything you can do with your phone offline, and being able to bring that with you. So this is not just for tech divers, it's also great for recreational divers. You can use it as your primary camera, you can use it as a backup camera, a communication tool, a tool to aid you in instruction. There's just so many options. And so you'll just have to decide if this is too nerve-wracking for you from the stories I shared. But again, I haven't had any issues. And if I ever do, I'll make sure I throw an update. But so far, it's worked flawlessly. And I remember meeting someone who said that they've been on it for like 400 dives or more, and they haven't had any issues either. So it's built fairly steady. And if you're looking for housing for your phone, one nice thing is like this particular brand doesn't force you to use an app. You can use whatever apps you want, which is kind of both a blessing and a curse, because it means you might have to figure out what camera to use. You might have to do a little extra setup. You might have to figure out how to configure your phone, but it gives you the option. So some people just aren't very good with technology, and so they don't want to have to go into the settings and figure things out. That might be something that would detract from using this thing. It's not going to set up the software for you, so you have to kind of figure some things out. I like that kind of thing. I like customization and being able to configure it the way I want it. But if you just want something out of the box, some things like the Sea Life housing we'll basically kind of just have this app. This is the app you can use. If you want to do anything outside of the app, you can't. But the nice thing is, it's basically ready to start taking photos and videos out of the box. And so I just want to give you that contrast of what the worlds can be in terms of the Dive phone housing. And so this one is kind of like the freedom is yours to do whatever you like, but also there's a little bit of work involved. Which, by the way, maybe I'll go ahead and plug my app. It's still not released or anything, but my goal is to try and give a little bit of that flexibility. So like you would be able to have everything you need for diving in terms of the tools and such for your DIVEVOK housing out of the box, to make it a little bit easier to use. Let me know if you're interested in the app. I can share some information in the near future, but also let me know what you think about the DIVEVOK. This thing is a award-winning touchscreen model. It works really well. I am super pleased on using it, and I'm going to continue to use it. If anything, probably buy more of the products and go even deeper into the DIVEVOK ecosystem. This thing has become a staple of my diving, but let me know your thoughts. Is it for you? Have you had experience with it? Have you enjoyed it? Share it for others in the comments below. If you're looking for some other gear reviews that I've done recently, then check out this playlist up here, or YouTube thinks that you might like this video over here. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.